Joseph. I wanted to meet you for a long time. Nice to meet you.
Welcome to the panel on Turahalli, Government's Mission or Civil Society's Vision. So Turahalli Minor and Reserve Forest, as it's officially called, is off Kanakapura Road. It's a beautiful place, as everybody knows. And it's over the years, it's been well known for birding, for rock climbing, adventure sports. But in the last few years, it's been facing a lot of threats from real estate developments, from encroachments, and of course, more recently, garbage dumping. And they've always been talks of government plans for development or creating a layout there. And now the latest idea is for a tree park. This is part of the Mission 2022. In December, the government had announced it. They wanted to green the city, provide better transport infrastructure, and so on. Now, the tree park is meant to have amenities like a 10-kilometer gravel walkway, a senior citizens corner, gymnasium, play area for citizens, toilet facilities, and so on and so forth. Now, there have been a lot of opposition from residents, environmentalists, activists for different reasons: legal, moral, ecological. Now, the accepted narrative is that lung spaces mean parks and gardens like Cubbon Park or Lalbagh. Now, when we talk about the commons, which are like sustainable natural spaces, which need to be accessible by residents for both physical and mental well-being. Now, question is, which areas should be these commons and what kind of commons would they be? We surely need tree parks, but where and what kind of tree parks is the question. So there are different positions here. There are people who say, there's already 35 acres of a tree park, let that be allowed for access and the rest of it can be left untouched. There are people, especially rock climbers and birders, who are talking about limited access to the space. And some residents and activists are saying, let's completely keep this off humans and let's limit all sorts of activities there. And nature deserves to rebound and rejuvenate them. Now we look at multiple options. We look at the pros and cons, and given that the effects of climate change are visible on a day-to-day basis, now should we interfere with one of the last remaining forest patches around the city? What should be the role of government in terms of policy or legislation or enforcement? And what should be civil society's role in preserving this unique heritage? On the other hand, it's also true that there are no green spaces in the city left where people can connect with nature. So can it be considered as a natural environment and a public space without necessarily turning it into a manicured garden? And there are different groups and different stakeholders who want different things for the city. What would be the sort of the least common denominator? So very happy to have multiple stakeholders around the table today. And a quick thing, house rules, only the panelists will talk and no interruptions. And all questions and comments you can add on to the chat. So I'd like to start with Bharat, who's a resident who's part of the Save Turahalli campaign. And Bharat, first thing is, you had a meeting today with the government, with the ministers coming in there. Can you just give us a quick update of what happened today with the context?
Thanks, Meera. The meeting went well for all the good reasons of wanting to retain Turahalli as a forest and not let it become a tree park. The ministers, both of them, S.T. Somshekar and Arvind Limbavadi, were patient enough to give all the citizens who wanted to speak a fair chance to speak. So that got the meeting extended for quite a long time. And right through the meeting, they were quite encouraging that the citizens took up the matters seriously and made enough noise about it to bring it to the attention of the politicians in the way it is supposed to not have been, but nonetheless, it did get to them. And they have assured, although verbally in front of the media also, of course, that they will not be going ahead with the tree park in the Turahalli Minor Forest. They would look to relocate the Turahalli tree park to some other location, suitable location. And at the same time, the minister was also not aware of an existing tree park on the other side. So he also took this chance to go around and have a look at the tree park on the other side. Since Turahalli tree minor forest area comes under the Turahalli as well as Yeshwanthpur constituency, since MLA Krishnappa was not on the scene, a phone call was immediately placed to him as well. And he was also in concurrence with S.T. Somshekar and Arvind Limbavadi to let Turahalli forest remain a forest so that it can go with the wishes of the citizens from the constituency.
Right. So, Bharat, can you just add a little bit of context in terms of, what has been your observations in the area, in the neighborhood? You've been living there for a while. How many people live there in that maybe a 10-kilometer radius, and what are the kind of commons available to people there?
Well, frankly speaking, I don't live in the neighborhood. I live near Banshankari Media Complex, but I used to volunteer at Turahalli for the cleanup and the sapling drives with the Social Forestry Department of the Forest Department. But there's actually a mixed demography of residents in the locality, but predominantly apartment dwellers live in that locality. And for quite a while, Turahalli was accessible to all kinds of people because there were people who used to use Turahalli for religious reasons because there are a few temples in the forest. And of course, morning walkers and pet walkers were also using the space, cyclists and boulders and people who would enter Turahalli for bird watching. So there was a diversified interest at play in Turahalli. And it was not just restricted to the people from the immediate vicinity of the Turahalli forest, but people would travel all the way from different parts of the city to come there because it's a very unique site in itself. There is no such site which has got a small hillock and the kind of terrain it exhibits for all kinds of recreational purposes. It could be best utilized to. Turahalli was a very unique site, and it still holds the same kind of value to it in terms of serving recreational purposes. But yes, it's a very pristine site at the moment, considering since a few years it's been locked down for public access. And ever since COVID happened, it's been regenerating really well because there's a lot of wild visitors in the neighborhood that is getting spotted. So, yeah.
Thank you, Bharat. Mr. Sanjay Mohan is here, the Principal Chief Conservator Forest. Welcome, sir. Like to request you to kind of talk about the Forest Department's plan for the forest. Is there already a DPR and budget allocated for it? Could you share those details, please?
No. Actually, I told you, the DPR is not met yet. See, we had just planned. No? This was only at the first stage only. Okay. So we were basically interacting with you all. If the people are keen about the park, it's fine. So that, still we are at that stage only. We have not come to any sort of plan and all.
Okay.
If the people are keen, we'll go about it. Hello.
So request others to mute yourselves, please.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. Please. No. Actually, see, Turahalli is a part of this one tree forest which we had planned. Okay. So apart from this Turahalli, we are having 2 more parks. So 2 more parks, things are on and all. But in Turahalli, some issues were there. So people had come to me also. So the question is, if the people don't want something to happen in some sort of place, it's fine. But people should know that we are also from the same. We are also there to conserve the forest and all. They are having this concept that we are going to cut. We are going to cut all the sort of trees and all, and we are going to do this and that. No, we are only going to enhance that forest. But still, people are not keen. It's fine. But the concept is quite good, and I would like to tell you that throughout the state, we are having as many as 140 parks. 140 parks are there throughout the state, and people are asking for more. Because here, what is happening? Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hello? See, what is happening? This concept has come in the state in 2014, right? So we thought that urban centers where a lot of people live and all, they don't have any opening. And if we have some forest patch in and around, and if it is full of weeds, one can't even enter. They must be aware that if you leave a forest patch right now, all weeds come into that. So if people would like to enjoy the forest, some walking path has to be there, some small facilities. people feel that as if we are going to make roads and make some sort of structures and buildings. No, it's only a concept of tree park. It is not like a horticulture park where we put lawns and all, manicured lawns and gardens. No, no, no. This is as much natural setting we would like to keep. We just keep it. Apart from that, we also add some more trees which will attract butterflies and birds. Got it? So
Okay.
that concept is doing so well, and even Government of India is also so much happy with the concept that they have launched this concept throughout the country. For each state, they have asked that you should come out with some 3-4 parks. Karnataka, fortunately, already has about 140 parks. So the
Okay.
concept is quite good, but I think some sort of, I don't know what is there in the people's mind.
Okay. So when you say enhancing the forest, you mean like providing the walkways and just allowing facilities for people to come in? Because if you compare with
Yeah, people to
the
come.
tree parks, for
Exactly.
example, JP Nagar has a tree park, but it does have built up area. It does have the benches and, other facility built areas within the park. So is that sort of an example that you're saying, or you're just going to just leave it and control the, access? What really are
No,
the...
no, no. Actually, that's what, yeah, exactly. It is called as a park. It is not the regular park where we built a lot of roadways. We built a road and we put lot of concrete road and building and all. Here,
Okay.
even the walking path will be a kacha path only. Only thing, if it is a humped area, if it is an undulating area, we'll make it slightly sort of walkable, because people of
Okay.
all age would like to go to the park. So they would like to walk around.
Okay.
And some platform, small platform where people can perform yoga and all those things. Apart from that, you go to any of our parks, there is nothing else. And not only that, since we forest department, we have expertise in all this wildlife, birds and butterflies. We know which plant is best to sort of suit butterfly, which will attract birds and all. Ultimately, that experience of the forest will sort of only go up.
Okay. But there's also
So
this,
that is the whole concept.
yeah, well, a lot of people are actually saying that there's
And
already
people say that this park can't be built. See, this.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I can follow. Please.
No, I was
Please
just
say it
saying,
again.
yeah, there is already a lot of people are saying there's already a tree park there in 35 acres, which is, next as part of the or adjacent to the park, to the forest, and which is currently underutilized. So is there need for, expanding that sort of a design to the rest of the forest area?
See what has happened. See, if you see the whole landscape there, thousands of apartments are coming. And in future, if you say about 5 years hence or 10 years hence, lot of housing colony will come, because everybody would like to have a house where there is a park and open space. And we have this thoroughly about 596 acres. Out of 596 acres, we were just planning to have some 40-50 acres only. Rest all will be kept in that only. So as far as concerned that wildlife will be killed and wildlife will go away, there will be no space. No, it is only a very small part of the forest which we wanted to have a park. Park means people can enter, people can go around, they can walk around, they can do yoga. That is the main thing.
Okay. And how many such, parks or mini forests are you planning around Bangalore?
No, actually, what happened? The CMs, there is a Vision 2022.
Yeah.
So there we had a meeting about, I think, some 3 months back. So there we had the CM told that you should come out with parks. So there we had promised in the meeting that we'd come out with at least 2 to 3 parks. So 3
Okay.
parks we had thought about. So
Okay.
2
Which are
parks.
the other areas?
This Kadgudi is one park. Kadgudi is one, and Bhutanhalli is one more park. So these 2 parks, there is no issue. We are going to do it. Only the issue came up with this park.
Okay. And but in general, from your perspective, from a forest department's perspective, like urban forests are pretty important in terms of slowing down climate change, and that's kind of pretty much in the news, right? Climate crisis is in the news nowadays. So
Yeah.
what is your goal in terms of
See,
ensuring there
forestry,
this much of the city should be green?
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead. Can you hear me?
Some connection issue.
Hello. Should I repeat my question?
Hello.
Yeah. Hello.
No, there's some now it's fine.
Okay.
Please say it again. Please say
The
it
question was, what is, given that currently climate change, climate crisis is in the news, especially, right? And forests have a pretty important role to play in slowing down climate change. And what is your plan, forest department's target in terms of having forests, and how much of greenery in the city are you really planning?
Some connectivity issues are there. I think you have to say it again.
Okay. Can you hear us, or should we come back to you in a bit?
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
Now, now it's fine. That's fine. Please tell me. Now it's fine.
The question was,
Please
what is
say
the forest department's plans and targets in terms of the number or the size, the scale of urban forests in the city? How much of greenery are you planning, and natural greenery like forests?
No, actually, every year, see what happens. Every year, in the past, you can say about 5 to 6 years. Every year, we come out with some, I think, some 8 to 10 parks in the whole of the state. Bangalore, we already have 3 parks. Okay,
Right.
and 3 more parks had been planned now. So I think wherever we have open space, wherever some land, see, it could be a forest land, it could be a non-forest land also. I would like to tell you that out of 143 parks in the state, as many as I think 20 to 30 parks are not forest land. See what is happening after seeing the concept of tree parks, the other people like this revenue department says, if this land is a wasteland, please do something. Because the concept is such a nice concept where you don't cut any trees, you enhance the trees there. So this year we had planned to do 3 parks, but if this park is not coming, we can find out some other alternate park.
Okay, because for example, the Lakshman Rao committee had, at that time in the 80s, they talked about using, converting lakes, which kind of had, because of encroachment or other reasons, which could not function as wetlands, those could be converted to tree parks, was one suggestion that came up then. So are you considering, like, beyond these, the 2 other ones that you talked about, Kadugodi and the other one, so are you looking at other places, smaller sort of spaces as mini forests within the city?
No. In fact, out of the 3 parks which have been already developed in Bangalore in the past, one was basically a lake bed only. It was basically a lake which had slowly shrunk in size, and ultimately the lake was not there. So we had developed the park there. See, ultimately the idea is the lake has to be restored like a lake only. But in some cases, it has become so late that you can't do anything. So
Right.
there we can think about park. But otherwise, forest department will certainly not like to build a park on the lake. Lake has to be restored as a lake only.
Okay. I'd like to now move to Leo. Leo, can you talk about the legal position? Like, because one of the things you had pointed out earlier was that you can't convert a forest, which is like classified, an area which is classified as a forest, into a tree park, because that is, as per the MOF rules, as per the Forest Act, it cannot be done. So could you explain that aspect, Leo?
Yeah, so I had met Mr. Mohan, and I've explained that to him as well 2 weeks ago. The basic point here is that the concept of a park, the definition of the park in terms of the law, is something that is crafted by humans. Okay, a forest, in contrast, is not something that is crafted by humans, but humans are part of forests. That is to be understood because we also have the Forest Rights Act. But the position as far as tree parks is concerned goes a little more deeper into the idea of what the role of the municipality is. If you take the Constitution of India and read 12th schedule, urban forestry is a municipal function. And the reason it was put there in the by parliamentarians is so that municipalities begin to create urban forests, which means tree parks. So the object of constructing tree parks is really a municipal function. It is not one of the forest department. And the question that comes up, and Mr. UV Singh has weighed in today on that issue in the Hindu today. I agree with everything UV Singh says except the last paragraph, which is what? That when you take a forest and turn it into any non-forest activity, there is a Forest Conservation Act, Section 2 applies, which basically was brought in 1980 to suggest that, it was a statutory break on state forest department turning forests into non-forests, which was happening quite widespread across the country. And we lost most of our forests in the 60s, 70s because they went for dams and infrastructure and so on. So once 1980 Conservation Act was passed, even then there was no compliance. which means that the compliance would have been to take permission from the center by, later on the Ministry of Environment got constituted after 1986. And the center would decide whether that diversion from forest to non-forest purpose was legitimate. Okay. And if it was ecologically viable. Those were the two conditions on which that was supposed to take place. But subsequently what happened was, since that Forest Conservation Act was not being complied with, and there was conflicts across the country, and the Godavarman petition became the touchstone for deciding how we move forward with this type of conflict. In which the Godavarman petition, the Chief Justice J.S. Verma constituted a committee, a special committee which would report to the Supreme Court. So any issue relating to diversion of any forest across the country would have to be made not to the ministry, because the Supreme Court found the ministry was colluding in illegal diversions. Therefore, it put a committee which was directly reporting to the Supreme Court. And so that committee would review and then recommend to the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court would pass orders if necessary. So what now it turns out is any diversion of forest land to a non-forest purpose not only has to go as an application to the Ministry of Environment and Forests as per the Forest Conservation Act, but it also necessarily has to go to the Supreme Court's committee. And if that is allowed, then it can be turned into a non-forest activity. So what I have explained now is the concept of a tree park is clearly a municipal function, both in terms of the Municipal Act, as also the Constitution of India, especially 12th schedule. And the role of the Forest Department is to safeguard forests in cooperation and collaboration with people, both from the Forest Conservation Act as well as from the Forest Rights Act of 2006. That said, in particular regard to Turahalli, the question is, what is the evolution of this forest? It has been a dry deciduous forest for a very long time. Birders, naturalists, climbers, boulderers, or whatever you call them, have contributed immensely to regeneration of natural regrowth. Now, what do I mean by that? Not everything there is natural. Quite a bit of it is planted. Forget the eucalyptus and acacia, which the Forest Department did in those days when they thought that was the best thing to do. If you look at the eucalyptus, the root system is so deep in many cases. I mean, as much as you see a eucalyptus tree grow tall, it's also as deep. So if you want to say, I'll remove all the eucalyptus trees and acacia, you'll have massive soil erosion there. So it has to be a selective removal of eucalyptus trees and a very careful replacement with certain types of species endemic to that region. When I say region, I mean the dry deciduous type of trees. You cannot come and plant Western Ghats species here. I mean, you might want to do that, but then what happens is it doesn't reflect the nature of the forest area. So Turahalli is declared as a minor forest in the statute book as per the Karnataka Forest Act, and it has been protected under that situation, under that norm. Unfortunately, in the last 20-30 years, there have been many attempts to encroach it. One attempt that ESG has played a role in stopping the encroachments at least 3 times. One attempt was an encroachment by some building mafia. They had sold off 400 acres of Turahalli to people, and we came to know, we filed a complaint. I don't know what happened to the complaint, but the police took up the matter, but it stopped. Next, we found encroachment by senior forest officials who put up a temple inside. And we had to report this to the Director General of Forest, Government of India, Ministry of Environment. And we said that we would like the temple removed because it's a fence eating the crop, and also setting up a temple inside would do a non-forest activity and also a mass gathering site.
Right.
We also got into that and stopped it. There is a High Court order in that. Fourth encroachment was actually by BDA, who took a good chunk of the forest. If you go to the southwest side of the forest, the so-called 32-acre tree park, as most people call it, is actually forest land. But BDA had already bulldozed it. So I intervened, filed a complaint. That based on that complaint, action was taken against the BDA commissioner, and the land was recovered by the Forest Department. So what we can say is this is the part that ESG has played. But more fundamentally, this park has been protected by SPARC, by the Karnataka Mountaineering Association, way back in the 1980s. They have done incredible work in shaping the type of biodiversity that you now see. And more recently, the Save Turahalli people in the past 5 years have done an incredible amount of work in making sure that there is natural vegetation that comes up, which is incredible, which is a kind of ethos with which urban forests have to be protected. I will say one last thing and I'll end my initial remark here. There is a concept that forests have to be locked up inside walls. That concept doesn't exist in law. There is restriction to sanctuaries and national parks. But that doesn't mean that you cannot go into a sanctuary. There are particular activities can be allowed inside a sanctuary. In national park, it's a higher level of protection. There cannot be any non-forest activity. But when it comes to minor forests and reserve forests, that's a different nature of law. So the policy that the forest department needs to adopt for Turahalli is not necessarily limited to Turahalli. It applies to the entire forests of the Karnataka in regard to minor forest classification or reserve forest classification.
Right.
The reason I bring this up is I heard Mr. Mohan say that they are very happy of having created 140 parks, tree parks. Firstly, it's not their business, but they have done it. And he said 75% of them are forest land converted to parks. Now, effectively, I think the public at large is saying when we as urbanized people have no concept of what wild lands mean, then I think it's an opportunity for us to allow our children. I immensely benefited going to Turahalli from the 1980s, mid 80s. I was going there bouldering, I went bird watching, and today if I'm doing environmental work, I give a great amount of credit to Turahalli. If I did not have that space to explore my mind and really be kind of captivated by the beauty of nature, my first sighting of the great horned owl was in Turahalli. Right? I mean, if somebody sees an amazing bird, now if you lock me out and say, oh, that forest has to be kept like that, then I think we have a problem. Then birding is not allowed, bouldering is not allowed. Many of the forest related activities are not allowed. So I will stop there. I'll come to other aspects later.
Thanks, Theo. I'll come back to this particular point later, but you talked about the role of the forest department. So I just want to go back to Mr. Sanjay because he also has to leave in a bit. Mr. Sanjay, can you hear me? You need to unmute.
I can hear.
So could you talk about
See,
what the forest department has done over the years in
no.
protecting
I would like to.
Turahalli, and also what your challenges are? What have been your constraints?
First of all, I would like to tell you one thing. Times have changed. Okay. Now, urban centers have become very thick. A lot of people are there. So, if you have a small forest patch, wildlife can't be there for long. See, all around you have apartment, people living and all. Where will the wildlife go? So, now the concept changed. Now, the urban forestry concept is even Government of India, they were telling that without asking Government of India, I would like to tell all the panelists here that after Supreme Court 96 judgment came, okay, after that, they told that every forest can be worked or anything can be done only when there is a working plan for that. I would like to tell the panelists here that there is a proper working plan for Bangalore forest, and there is a working circle called as Urban Forestry Working Circle. Urban Forestry Working Circle clearly says that we have to go for this urban planting, urban parks, and this has been very well approved by the Government of India. So the question of not taking permission of Government of India is absolutely false. And even Dr. U. Singh's report also that whatever news item came also is not fully informed. I would like to tell that there is a proper working plan with urban forestry into it, and it has been approved by the Government of India. This is one thing.
Can you share that document, sir?
And as I have told you,
will you be able to share that document after
share
this?
with means what?
You talked about the document,
oh, yeah, exactly.
right?
Working plan.
Okay,
Yes,
the working plan.
It's called working plan for Bangalore.
Okay, so we'll be in touch with you. We'd like to refer to that. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. So my concept is that now that the times have changed, a small patch of forest, it cannot remain wild, and jungle and wildlife can't be there for long. Today, if you are seeing some wildlife, because we have seen in so many places, where all around people come and it becomes totally urbanized, how do you think that wildlife can be there? So ultimately, the best way is to keep the forest intact, make it more rich, so that birds and small insects and butterfly can come. See, this wildlife, particularly summers and deer, can't live there for long. Okay, people are in the misconception that wildlife is there and not. Wildlife, particularly birds and butterfly, can be enhanced. That concept can be enhanced by putting some more trees. And forest department is doing exactly that. We are not cutting even a single tree. We are only putting some more trees. But people have their own this thing.
So your plan that you talked about, so there are some 500 odd acres right now which are kind of defined as a forest. So out of it, how many acres are?
See, 525 acres are there, and we had planned to do about 50-60 acres in that. The 50-60 acres of park we wanted to make.
50, 60 out of the 500 odd acres.
About 590 acres and around 60, 70 acres park was supposed to be made. Park
Okay.
made me only some area we wanted to have that people can walk into it. Not going to cut a single tree. Not going to, only we are going to plant some more trees, some more things. That's all.
Okay. In essence, you're talking about, like, for example, there's an existing 35-acre park, maybe something like doubling it almost 2 or 3 times of that. And that's all you're talking about. Because one of the question is
Lot of
already
people, a
there's,
lot of apartments are coming.
so you want to expand the park from the 35 acres to maybe around, 50, 60 acres. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
No, not expand. This park, which is there already, is on the other side. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
And this one is not on that side. As I told you, a lot of apartments are coming. So if there is one more small park for people to walk around, there's no harm. But still, I will again say that if the people are not keen about something, we will not do it.
Sure. Got it. Okay. And are there any plans to improve or facilitate access to the other side, the 35-acre park, the current one that BDA had already built?
No. Other site is an officially already a park, tree park.
Correct.
So people access to
So
it.
that's not under your purview anyway.
No. It is under it is under our purview only. But the question is, it is a tree park. So when it is a tree park, people have access to it. Na?
Right. So there's nothing much to be done there, you're saying.
So that is the thing.
Okay. And one more thing. So what has been your challenges on your side, in ensuring that Turahalli thrives so far all these years?
See, Turahalli is there and Turahalli will be there, and we are supposed to do a very good job of the whole thing. But still, again, I'm telling, if the local people doesn't want anything, it can be talked, it can be discussed. And I'm told that our Honorable Forest Minister had also gone there today. Our Honorable Forest Minister had gone there and spoken to the people there. So he has also told them that if you are not very keen about them, then I will come back and talk to my officials, and we will take some stand on that.
Okay. Mr. Sanjay, I was just asking, I don't know if you caught my other question. What is the challenges that the Forest Department faces in terms of ensuring Turahalli is a thriving forest ecosystem? Because it's not an easy job, I'm sure, because you have your limited means and resources and so on. So what have you been facing?
The Turahalli forest is all around, human habitation is there, and it is going to only increase by leaps and bounds.
Right.
So you will not have the real ecosystem which we have in a big forest. Okay. But we can try to be as close to it. So when I say to have as close to it, we can sort of plant some more local species, can be sort of put, herbs and shrubs can be put, so that whatever, as much as possible as to a real forest, if you want, we can do it. And it is quite possible. But don't expect elephants and leopards and things to be there. Ultimately, Turahalli will be having only birds and butterflies. Because what happens when the forest is surrounded by people all around, large animals can't live there.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Sanjay. And I'd like to ask the next question to Joseph Hoover. Just continuing on what Leo mentioned, saying it is also important for people to have access to nature. And Joseph, your approach is that it should be a place off limits to humans. So would you like to come in and why your position is that way? And what do you think are the alternatives? Where do people go? If people, especially in the neighborhood, right? Everybody cannot be going up to Lalbagh or Cubbon Park. What is the option that people in that area of Kanakapura Road have? Rajarashwari Nagar, Kanakapura Road, this side and all that. You need to unmute yourself, Joseph.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. Now, coming to what you said, there are plenty of parks around Rajarashwari Nagar. Parks can be created anywhere you want it. To convert an existing forest into a tree park is illogical.
Okay.
I'll just go away from Turahalli for a minute. You look at the Bangalore University Biodiversity Park. That's awesome. We are destroying that. Instead of protecting it, we are destroying it. And then we want to come to a forest and create a biodiversity park. There's no need. As Mr. Sanjay Mohan rightly said, you can have endemic species of plants, shrubs around there to enhance the biodiversity there. That's perfectly all right. Now, talking about Leo saying that there should be an activity. It was then 40 years ago. Even I used to cycle from Chamrajpet to Yashwantpur to play cricket, or I used to go to ITI. Now I can't do that, right? So ecosystems have changed. The entire thing has changed. So let's not argue about what happened then, who did what. Today, what is the crisis? We are all in the throes of already climate crisis. We all know, we are hearing about it, we are feeling it, we understand that about it. So are we going to take another chance to destroy what little is left of our forests? Do we humans need everything? Can't we do without that? Can't we stay without the forest? Leave the park alone. Let the forest regenerate. It's generating so well, regenerating so well. And people are happy about it. Why do we need it? You can have your activities. You can go around. If you're so interested in doing what activities you want to do, there are plenty of places. There are plenty of options. Why
Even walking through forests.
Yeah, why only the forest? Why only the forest? There are other areas. Look at it. We cannot anymore destroy what is left of our forest in Bangalore. Bangalore has spread its wings 360 degrees. Lakes have gone, forests have gone. And as Mr. Sanjay Mohan rightly said, Kadgonanalli and even Bhutanalli, they recovered 36 acres recently. If they do come up with a tree park, it's definitely going to enhance the biodiversity, because that had been the trees had been cut down, the layout had been formed. They've recovered. Let them do that. In Kadgonanalli, yes, it's already been encroached by certain officials. Even the police department has encroached the land. There's nothing you can do there because it's surrounded by all kind of apartments and all other activities. Let's not worry about that. Leave Turahalli around and let's go to Jakkur. Jakkur is a fantastic area. There's prime property. People don't want to do a tree park there. Why not? Let's go to Jakkur. Jakkur is expansive land waiting for you to convert a tree park. It needs a tree park. North Bangalore definitely needs a support, lung space. So let's not, get into the strip of saying that we are being denied. No, we cannot be greedy. We are avaricious. We are destroying everything that is left. There's no more. We cannot compromise on that. It's our life, the future generation's life. So there is little forest left in Bangalore. Let's keep it intact. Let's enjoy that. If I want to go rock climbing, I'll go somewhere else. If I want to go hiking, I'll go somewhere else. There has to be restrictions to save what little is left. There's no two ways about that.
But the somewhere else, somebody else will have a same take on that kind of a place also, right?
Yeah.
And where do we stop? Where do we have this balance between, what is accessible and what to leave pristine?
That is the choice people have to take. There is Shravan Durga, people are going. There are restricted areas in different parts. People are going trekking, they're going hiking. People are going cycling. Why do you need to cycle within the forest? Can't you cycle around the forest? Can't you walk around the park instead of walking inside the park? That park, I've been part of this for a very, very long time. That is a beautiful forest, though there's acacia and eucalyptus, which has been planted for a purpose because it is barren and it's a shrub jungle. It's regeneration. There is a crop of rocks there. It's nicely now laid out. And over the years, people themselves, the locals, have gone and planted saplings. You see the generation, the plants are looking very healthy. Right. The forest department is doing its bit. We need to assist the forest department in seeing what best we can get out of them. We need to pat them and tell them, listen, you don't do this, but we are there to help you out. We can do this to, build our own future. Protect our own future. So let's not harp about this. There is no time for all this.
Right.
All the talk about, Turahalli should be this, Turahalli. No, Turahalli should be Turahalli as a forest and no intrusion. Yes, if you want education, as Leo rightly said, he went there, he got educated, he's an environmentalist today. The same, I could say that. Because I have got the reason, if what I am today is because I have the experience. I can talk about it, I can write about it, I can relate to it. Be it wildlife conservation. I used to go to Bandipur, Nagrol and learn, and now I can do a little bit of work for that. A little bit, I could say a pinhead of contribution. We could have nature walk for children, nature classes for children, yes. Let's not get into this system of saying, you need to have these kind of activities, yoga. No, yoga, there are plenty of yoga centers.
So you're saying you're okay with nature walks and birding and basic things like that?
Birding around the park, you've got plenty.
Okay.
Mira, if you come around this area, you'll understand this is a state forest. This is a fragmented forest, thoroughly is fragmented. Right. There are different patches of forest. There are plenty of birds. I live in Rajarajeshwari Nagar. I've got about 117 species of birds. I've recorded that because I live in an area between Bangalore University and Turahalli. I enjoy that.
Right.
So let's not get on saying that birders need to go there only. Birders go to Lalbagh also. Birders go to Valley School. Birders go to Bannerghatta. Birders go everywhere.
Okay, let me thanks Joseph. Let me bring in Deepa, who's a birder here. Deepa, what would you say? I mean, see, at one level it is true, if you keep the place open to visitors, whether it's bird watching or rock climbing, it's pretty hard to ensure that the ecology is not harmed. I mean, at some level we can't really trust people. You need to constantly monitor, ensuring that they don't step off the boundary or they don't throw kachra and so on, right? So how do you do that, and this trade-off between going to a place and really enjoying nature versus keeping it like safe from humans? What is your take, Deepa?
Hi everybody. Mira, just before we officially started the meeting, I found that you had given you or somebody had given a quite an interesting suggestion that there is might be restricted access in terms of 1 day a week, something like that, when the guards would be there to ensure that people of all kinds would have access for a limited time and could be counted as they come out. We can certainly, since it is now completely fenced off with gates, I think that is a very feasible idea. So whether it is bird watching or rock climbing or this one, it could be open for a very limited time, and the fences can be closed up again. That way, yes, people do have access, and at that time it could be access for everybody. But after that time, the gate could be closed.
Right. So, but also even when, for example, in Hesarghatta itself, right, in many forests, you'll see even like wildlife enthusiasts and photographers themselves can become nuisances. So there is need, whatever we decide to do, and moment you talk about giving access, there's a lot of work to be done in ensuring, like you need, security guards and forest guards and, to keep things in line. Mr. Sanjay Bhawan, do you want to just come in from a budget perspective? Do you think that is something feasible? Whatever decision you take, would you have enough, human resources and budget to ensure that it can still be like, preserved as a forest?
No, no. As I had told you, that when we make a tree park in that forest, in the forest area, it's a very small area which we are making. Out of, I told you, 600 acres, we had planned to do only some 50 acres, and not much funds here. See what we do, we only fence this 50, 60 acres and make one walking path, and maybe when the people start coming, it's a small place to sit down, some benches and all. So in terms of, see, these parks are not at all very, very costly. With a very small sum, we can do this park. Unlike horticulture parks, where we do lawns and manicured gardens and all. So budget was not at all an issue here.
Okay. So you're saying budget's not an issue. But given that now you're saying it's only going to be 50, 60 acres you're looking at, but a lot of people have also been worried because they really didn't know what the plan was, because nothing was put out in public domain and there's no consultation. So do you think this lack of transparency is what, got people worried, and you're saying...
No, not at all. Not. See what happens. See, we have an experience of 140 parks in the whole state. See, nobody objects to the park. They know that the forest department have been doing an excellent job everywhere. But here, what happened? I think the people had sort of I don't know from where it came, that fear and apprehension that they will cut down the trees and all those things. Right. I don't know, like from where those ideas came, because we never faced such an issue, such a sort of a challenge anywhere in the state. And MLAs are asking, please make a park in my area also, and we are really, because we can't make so many parks in one time. So it is a very, very popular scheme. Yeah.
Okay.
In that case, when there is an existing park, what is the need for one more?
that is only one side of the area. Now, see, if you have lived in that part, lot of apartments are coming. In 5 years, you don't know what will be the what will the what will be the number of people there. So we need one more space where people could go out.
Okay. So I understand what you're saying is that, as the population grows around, there are going to be more apartments, more buildings and more houses
Yes.
coming in, and you need to kind
Loading.
of
Yeah, yeah.
keep those in mind. Right.
Yes.
But so would you comment that in the future, I mean, whatever the plan for Turahalli or Butanahalli or, Kadugodi, will you ensure that there will be public consultations so that both local communities as well as experts can kind of weigh in and, you can work with people to actually come up with a solution that works for everybody?
Exactly. So here also we are quite open. If the people want to suggest something, want to say something, they're fine. But from the very, if they don't want us to enter the place at all, then we can't then we can't even talk now here,
Okay.
because all of them had come to my office. So I told, okay, fine, you please promote something. We can also adopt that. But I don't know. People don't want the park there at all.
Okay. Okay. Actually, that
So,
brings me to a
but
question
yes,
for.
we are always open. If somebody comes,
Okay, that you're always open. Thank you. Thank you, sir, for that. But I
yeah,
think
yeah,
that brings me to a
yeah.
question for Leo. Leo, this is this whole, approach or like this perception that civil society groups or activists always oppose. And have you or other groups tried to propose a constructive, like alternative, saying, hey, if this is the current whatever vision, mission 2022, and here is this alternative mission 20, which are kind of coming up from ground up with working with local communities. Has there been those kind of efforts? Would that be a better way to make this happen, and then the kind of twain can meet?
So yeah, we have always been constructive, never destructive. But that said, the point is this: in 2012, we started this process. Not now, but 2009 years ago. That is when we found that the senior officers had encroached the forest. And then we asked them that, there is a scheme called the Joint Forest Planning and Management Scheme, which can be also applied to urban forests. And we worked with local villagers. And you see, the point is this: today, because apartments have come up, we may not see villages, but those days villagers were there. They have certain natural rights, and they cannot just be erased because I have a certain point of view that says forests are only for flora and fauna minus humans. That concept doesn't exist in law, as I said before. But that said, the Urban Forest Committee was set up in 2012 October. And the idea of that was to actually work with the forest department and also BDA and municipality and so on to create an imagination of Turahalli so that it could become a model not just for the state but for the entire country. The concept of tree park was certainly not there. The concept which was there in that series of meetings we had with the forest department was to imagine the idea of forest in an urbanized setting as a possible biodiversity refuge and also an educative space. So we were quite aware of the fact that some guys would come and drink and leave bottles around. I have gone and stopped many a time people doing shooting there, and in doing shooting they cut off trees. I filed complaints for that also. So I don't want to list out all the other things that many of the others have done, but the point really is this: there's a lot of local involvement in keeping Turahalli what it is. Now, if suppose now you say we'll lock Turahalli up and we'll restrict access to it, and birding go around it, that would be the most unecological statement to make. I'll tell you why. Birds don't come to the fringes of the forest. If you really want to educate people to understand what kind of forest is a complex vegetation patch. So on the fringes, given the disturbance both of traffic, the birds are certainly not going to come there. So how are you going to teach bird watching? Then you can say, go to your park and sit in your garden. But how many people have gardens? How many people have parks that are actually providing the capacity to understand that there's so much teeming wildlife within the city, right? So, which is why I have always argued, and this argument went very well with Mr. Mohan's predecessor, Mr. Punati Sridhar, and we had worked with him over several meetings, and those plans are also on our website. You can download them. We had worked with birders. Joe had come to our office. We had worked with the bouldering community, the climbing community, and so we said, now that the city has kind of embraced Turahalli in its built form, what can happen? So one of the ways in which we imagined the future of Turahalli and such forests was to ensure that the biodiversity remains as it is. that there is a natural regeneration of biodiversity that takes place, because let me put it this way, there are hornbills there, grey hornbills, right? Hornbills are great planters. They are the best gardeners of the forest. Lots of little birds. I mean, I can go on, but that will take a long time. Deepa will put out a list that she has seen there. But they are planting the forest every day. And just by walking and looking at them through a binoculars, you're not going to disturb them. And certainly birders have not gone across and destroyed it. In fact, we have also stopped poaching them. All right. The other part is, when you think of bouldering as an activity, it is probably one of the most fascinating things you can imagine in embracing this planet. You're embracing those rocks which are 3.5 billion years old. And yes, you're also taking the first baby steps to understand what it is to scale the Himalayas. People who have climbed boulders in Turahalli have climbed. Now, these are people who did not have cars and bikes to go to Savandurga or Ramnagar and so on. Most of us, we came from working class family. We came from poorer backgrounds. We may have vehicles now, but at that time we walked or we cycled. And we learned how to climb. So we cannot use our middle class and upper class mindset and project it. A lot of young people there, a lot of kids in the villages, I know a lot of kids there, want to access and learn climbing. I cannot tell them go across to Savandurga or go to Jakkur or go to 80 kilometers away. You know, the point is, when are you going to actually show that people locally have to have the concern to ensure that they embrace local ecological landscapes and protect them for posterity? I just want to stop by saying one last thing. I just came away from a hearing which was held by the Chief Justice on the protection of lakes, in which he has written down that unless public engagement in lakes takes place and public education of how to take care of lakes takes place, we cannot achieve whatever you do. You can put a fence and you can put guards, but I have seen what happens to those things. When the fence also eats the crop, and I have shown you many evidences of that, this is not a model that is going to be viable. So what we need to imagine is a model where people locally learn how to use Turahalli responsibly. It is called wise use. There is a convention called the Ramsar Convention, which applies to wetlands. But a similar convention applies also to forests. So please, let's appreciate that there is a lot of thought that has gone into the past. And also read the Forest Rights Act. There is something called a community conservation zone. It's a central statute. It overrides everything else. And there are people there, local people, villagers, who used to be able to tell us the variety of plants that are in Turahalli. Just about 8 months ago, I was walking in Turahalli and a man was looking for a particular plant. And I said, why? What are you looking for? He said, adondu gida ide. ಆ ಗಿಡದಲ್ಲಿ ನಾನು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಇದು ಮಜ್ಜಿಗೆಗೆ ಹಾಕ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಕೊಟ್ರೆ ನಾನು ಹಸುಗೆ ವಾಸಿ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಏನಂದ್ರೆ it was not able to urinate. Some stones had formed, right? So that man knew the biodiversity of the area. Do any one of us know that? Should we learn from him? Should we not learn to appreciate that biodiversity and traditional knowledge is protected under the Biodiversity Act? It should be, if anything, declared as a biodiversity refuge and a beautiful education space where people should be allowed to go and bird watch and enjoy that space, but certainly not to go and drink and certainly not to expand temples and create a nuisance. That definitely not. So that much, I think, wisdom people have, and that much capacity of oversight, I think local communities have. And it is also a function where local ward committees must be involved, because that is a constitutional requirement now. I'll stop there.
Thanks. So maybe I'd like to bring in, like, I mean, Bharat, if you could talk about this. I mean, Leo brought out this issue of there's still a class sort of a difference, and I was hoping Prakash Belwadi would be here. He also had some points on this. Who has access, and at this point, can we say this particular campaign is led by the residents of apartments who have this certain expectation of a natural space or a forest, or they understand climate change and so on? What about the larger community? What about the villagers staying there? What do you see playing out there, Bharat?
Well, definitely, I would agree with you that this was largely led by people who do not come from representing all factions of the society. It was largely people who, I mean, considering the neighborhood in which Turahalli is situated, the predominant population would be from the apartments. And but one thing I need to highlight here, there is a small group called Chiguru, which consists of very young children from the neighborhood. And it was mentioned earlier by Leo and Joseph that there were villages previously in that area. And to a certain extent, there is still sort of village-like atmosphere on one side of Turahalli forest. So this Chiguru group, which takes nature walks earlier into the minor forest and now onto the tree park side, are still the people from the same community. And ever since we've started making some noise for Turahalli, ever since this tree park issue have come up, those children have also stood with Save Turahalli group. So it's not like they are completely excluded, but they're not as much included as the rest of us who are in this.
And how do you fix that?
Well, access, I think it's a very tricky situation, because when you have to consider giving people selective access, on what preference does one work?
I'm not just talking about access. I'm talking about including those voices, saying what do the different communities around want really, right? There are people who are living in that Shobha apartment who will say, no, let's just completely cut this off. It deserves to be, saved as is, etc. But then villagers who have been living here much longer, they may have their whatever routines and, traditions, and they are used to accessing the place. So where do you kind of bring in all these multiple voices and find a common ground?
I think the delicate balance is a very difficult thing to ask, and it's mostly utopian in imagination, I can say at this stage. Because one thing, as repeatedly Sanjay Mohan has been saying, that there is huge urbanization around Turahalli that's happening. So one thing we are almost conveniently forgetting is the carrying capacity of Turahalli.
True.
Does Turahalli have the carrying capacity to include so much of diversified interest inside? It could be the villagers who want to access the temple. It could be the villagers who want to graze their cattle. It could be the birders. It could be anybody for that matter. Do we have the carrying capacity? On what basis will you select who goes in? So inclusivity is inherently not existent there. We can only try our level best to bring it to parity, but I don't think so it's possible in case of Thurali or for any other place for that matter. I mean, I think Deepa Mohan earlier was mentioning about how Kaveri Wildlife Sanctuary has been closed since 2016, but still those elites have the access because they can book resorts and homestays and still access nature. But commoners, somebody like a subaltern, does not have the access to such a space. And that inequality is existent in the system, and the system tries really hard to keep the inequality in place so that it can continue functioning opaquely. So I think Chiguru, I definitely think is a positive step, because the children from the community, the future citizens who probably might continue living in Turahalli, are being educated of what is the importance of a place like Turahalli to remain as wild as it could remain, considering the pressures of urbanization around it. Likewise, I think if more such groups do come around, there definitely is going to be a hope for all communities to sensibly, with a lot of wisdom, to access Turahalli. Because right now what we're talking about only direct extractive benefits of Turahalli. There are a lot of tangential benefits which could be environmental, it could be social, it could be economic in nature. People could start living healthy, not even necessarily have to step inside, because if Turahalli remains green and there is a canopy that is building, there is connectivity to other parts of the parks, and even as far as maybe BM Kaval and let's say to the state reserve forest on the far end near BGS, you never know. It could just convert into a more healthy ecosystem, which is more essential than people trying to access Turahalli for all the extractive benefits we can possibly derive out of it. So I think for a while we need to conserve our access into these spaces so that let it regenerate itself, probably for once that is possible, and that's made possible rather, if we can say, because we are always thinking of making, creating, constructing, which I don't think so needs to be done with nature. It can take care of itself. We don't have to do it. So I think in terms of equality, if we can all together stay away for some time, I think that's the best equality we can give for Turahalli and take from Turahalli.
Right. So the point about Chiguru was interesting, but again, my sense is right now that particular aspect of being inclusive and considering like all the wider range of class and other differences from the different communities around has not been given enough attention. Is the sense I get. Vinay, I got your point. I mean, I understand like, yeah, grazers and villages are going in, but again, in the voice, like for example, when you meet or have a ideally you should have a consultation. We know Leo keeps talking about it and how to get like multiple stakeholders into the room. And also, sorry, I didn't mean to single out Shobha per se. It was more that I just remembered that name from one of the apartment names mentioned earlier today. So it's the same. It's not about Shobha. It's about any apartment living on the periphery of natural spaces like this. And it's the same case with, with Hezargatta, with Banargatta. In fact, there was one good question earlier about there are so many other situations. So I had this one question to Leo. While Turahalli is an important itself, but this particular decision, do you see whatever happens here will set a precedence?
I think that's a very important question, because it's a very hubristic decision. If the chief minister has an imagination of a city, he has no right to decide what that imagination has to materialize as. He can propose it. And once he proposes it, then it has to go through the due process, which it has not gone through. Just because he calls the forest department and forest PCCF is a subordinate of the chief minister, he cannot say yes to it. In fact, I told this to Mr. Mohan. He could have asked the chief minister, sir, it's a good idea. I will put it across through the due process. And the due process here includes also the public. So the plan, for instance, could have been shared. All this mystery, the whole problem of bureaucracy is it mystifies. When you mystify, there is suspicion. When there is suspicion, there is conflict. I've been seeing this again and again and again. Now, I want to say this, National Forest Policy came in 2018, the draft. Under that policy, Thurali would have been privatized, and such forests would have been privatized across the country. I raised the issue with Mr. Jairam Ramesh. He asked Mr. Anand Sharma, who was then the chairman of the parliamentary committee, to call for a special meeting. 28 MPs were sitting. I went and deposed before him. And I would like everyone who was participating and to download that report and read it. It actually questions the policy, and the policy was withdrawn. If that policy had gone through, corporate control of these forests would have been absolute. Forget you and I quarreling over accessing for bird watching or bouldering. It would have become corporatized. And there is a doctrine called the public trust doctrine. The doctrine very clearly says these forests are not the property of the state. It is my property, it is your property, it is our resources. The state is merely a custodian. And so there has to be a reasonable restriction. It cannot be absolute. So today, if you say, I'm going to do it this way, and because I've got 10,000 people and we are going to reasonably restrict or absolutely restrict, somebody will go to court. And one thing I always say is avoid a litigious process. Don't end up in court unnecessarily.
Been there, done that.
No, I am there. I've been doing it every day. I mean, even courts are overwhelmed. I mean, the environmental conflicts are half the cases that I hear in PILs there. So why do you want to add one more to that list? Why do you want to go to court? Why can't we sit down and talk and imagine together and come up with a wise use plan for Thurali, which will be an amazing plan for the entire country? I was in Loktak Lake the other day, where the forest department wants to throw out people who are protecting the lake. See, these conflicts have to be understood very sensitively. You cannot make a rule for Thurali which is going to affect the rights of thousands and thousands of communities across the state. Forest Department is aware of it. Department of Environment is aware of it. And I think Joe and I are also aware of the power of law here. So we cannot recklessly use that amazing power, which can be crafted and molded in a particular way. So we can have a beautiful plan for Thurali where good things can happen and bad things can be kept out. And we can all be happy ever after.
So what does it take to get there? And this is where I'd like everybody to come in, even Dr. Bhanu, maybe you could also add to this. Today there was this meeting and Dr. Bhanu was quite optimistic about that. So one part is to work with the government because they have a particular, they're starting from a particular starting point, right? And then within the communities also, between the different stakeholders, from the villages to apartment residents to environmentals, there are still like differences of opinion, right? And when you have so many different points or needs of all these stakeholders, how do you kind of find this middle ground and this compromise? I mean, if you compromise, it's like nobody is really happy, right? So I just like everybody to kind of weigh in on that, and others on the who are listening in, if you could share your thoughts on like options. So what we are hoping to do after this is to kind of tabulate what are the possibilities for Turahalli, and if you have, for example, a vision for Turahalli that you have written in, maybe we could kind of collaborate on proposal that could be a starting point for a better public discourse, a more transparent discourse, and take it from there. So please do, put your points on chat, and if you want to leave your email ID or phone number, please do that so we can actually continue the conversation after this. But meanwhile, right now, I'd like the panelists to talk about how we could kind of come up to a deliberative, thoughtful, and a shared solution, shared vision for Turahalli's future.
Can I start? Can I
Yes, sir.
start?
Yeah, go ahead. Because you've been
Now,
one of the few optimistic people today after today's meeting.
the optimism was very evident in all of us who attended the meeting. The ministers were very responsive to our requests, and instantly he halted the work, almost instructed the operator to stop it for some time until the final decision is taken. So temporarily it is halted. Now regarding the apartments and lot of development that's going to come up all around, it's not the worry of forest department to think about what the apartments do. You are not providing for the apartments. Your responsibility is to take care of the forest. If the apartment people want, the builder has to provide for it. The forest department does not have to worry about that. It's not their duty to do it. And a forest is a sacred place. And let's maintain the sacredness of that place. And when I say this, I say respect everybody. Let's respect ourselves. Let's respect the forest. Let's respect the flora and fauna that is there inside the forest. The last vestige of some greenery that is there adjacent to Bangalore, and you want to grab even that. Now, what happens? Just look at this past 10 months. Just look at the past 10 months. For the past 2 years, entry is restricted, but the past 10 months, totally it is stopped. The forest has flowered, it has bloomed, it has rejuvenated. There is a lot more flora, there is a lot more animal life there. A forest need not mean leopards, cats, big cats and tigers and all. Even a small mongoose. It need not just be butterflies and birds. Even a small hare. They have their own rights. Why are we only worried about my going and watching, my going and bouldering, my going and cycling? Why don't we respect the rights of the animals there too? What else they have their place to go? Have they got any other place to go? A man can go. What is the concept of this tree park? When you say tree park, it is a mirage. You see a park, a forest that becomes a park. Tomorrow you will neither have a park nor a forest. It will disappear. It will become an urban jungle. Today he is talking of yoga. Tomorrow they will put up a fountain, a child's park, a sand pit, and they're already talking of a canteen, a parking area. No, what not? Everything will come up. And it's, mind you, whatever is being said is wrong. There is already a 40-acre plant, this tree park that's carved out of this existing Turahalli forest that is underutilized, underdeveloped. They have not looked at that at all. 10 years back, they created it. Now they want to create another park out of this. And if you keep doing it every decade, maybe in another 50 years, the forest will vanish. And you will have to go, whether you want it or not, you will have to go to Savanadurga, you will have to go to Bannerghatta, or you will, maybe not even Bannerghatta, BRT only. We will be left with nothing. Let us protect it. Let us respect it. Our demand is very simple. Our request is very simple. Let the forest be. It can take care of itself. Forest department is not an expert. The forest itself is an expert. It will take care of itself. Leave it. Please leave it. Go and take care of forests or parks that you want to create elsewhere.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Banu. Unfortunately, Mr. Sanjay Mohan is not here. He said he had to leave by around 6:30, so he left a little while earlier. But yeah, this is a very, good point. But one thing that I've been observing, because every time one plan like this comes up, and then there is a bunch of people, activists, and the local community which have to, which has to start a campaign against it or protest or look at alternatives. How much bandwidth and energy do we really have as citizens, right? From the steel flyover protest to Hesarghatta to Turahalli, even Bannerghatta. So it's just going on and on and on. How do you get to a point while processes are followed by default. How do you actually fix the system rather than these individual fights? How many fights can people really fight? How it's not really a scalable solution, right? And this is, I'm not sure if we really have an answer to this, but if we can look at it from that perspective, which means that, and I'm very surprised actually nobody brought this point. How do you bring this into an electoral agenda? So if I'd invite Bharat and others to just weigh in on this.
Meera, can I just say one last thing?
You said many last things, Leo.
No, but because you bring up new questions, I have to say one more thing. There is a decision of this NGT Southern Zone in a case in ESG fought. This is relating to Chalkere. Okay? And this is about access to resources like this, common property resources. And we must read what the NGT said, and that has been upheld by the Supreme Court. It actually, you can craft. It is not a utopian idea. People have been doing it for millions of years. It's just that we now have an urbanization situation which is unprecedented. Therefore, we have to be far more intelligent, and that intelligence exists amongst us. So the NGT has actually provided a space in which, even though there are transformations, land use transformation that takes place, certain kinds of things are possible in how you keep the, see, I'll put it this way. This forest has forest fires, as many forests have. Okay. When you take the position that forests are out of bounds for people, what happens is that sometimes the type of herbivore density which is essential to keep grasses down is removed. Then what happens when you have the dry season, long dry season, there'll be a fire which will just burn the entire forest down. Now there are apartments around it. Let's be clear about what this means. If suppose the forest catches fire and it jumps off to the apartment, some apartments are very close there. So we have to be very careful about how you think about keeping it locked out. It is not an utopian idea to manage forests. People know how to do it. People have lived with forests, and we have that skills, we have that knowledge, and that tradition exists extremely widely in this country, and we have to tap into that.
Right. Any of the other panelists would like to add? Bharat, you'd like to say something?
Well, Meera, as long as we are looking to manage forests in an extractive way, I don't think so. This problem, not just within Turahalli's limitations or anywhere for that matter, is going to get solved. Because the moment we start looking at what can I derive out of such spaces, I don't think so the battle is going any further from that point.
But that brings you to the larger question of education, right? And that's something, as individuals, of course, we may do this on one-off basis, but again, how do you make sure that this understanding becomes part of people's learning and curriculums, right? Otherwise, how do we even build the next generation of people who realize the value of this? It's not like everybody will, like Leo, will walk into a forest and understand and become an environment, right? And you need to have this formal pedagogy and structure actually looking at these aspects.
Well, unfortunate to what you're saying, I think last year NCERT did remove quite a lot of topics from the syllabus which had to do with climate change and all those discussions. So we are in fact talking in the other direction while the government is walking in a different direction altogether.
Yeah.
So I think the pedagogy is not, or should not rather restricted be to what we learn at schools. I think schools should be brought home. And when I say schools should be brought home, it's not necessarily just for the children, but for the adults as well. How much can we contain ourselves? I think that's where the question begins. And this, I don't think so, is restricted only to accessing Turahalli forest or any such places which has got immediate benefits, because the way we construct our lifestyles have greater repercussions on a larger ecosystem beyond the forest within the urban infrastructures. Faraway forests like in the Western Ghats, or probably we all have smartphones. So forests as far as somewhere in Africa, in the Democratic Republic of Congo are still getting affected with the way we have structured our lifestyles. I think the systemic change that you did question about, I think has to come with the way we structure our lifestyles. So long as we are going away from conservative economy to a consumptive economy, even are ratified, and we will continue consuming everything like the way we consume, because now in the way we are consuming things, everything is so atomized, and every atomized thing is so commercialized, nothing is going to get spared. Can we start shifting that mindset? Thereafter, I think our forests will be treated at par with ourselves. And there begins the education which is required to have a a nice standing forest, at the same time people who are treated on equal pedestals, and everything will be a very utopian society.
Right. Thanks. I think that's a very important point, but it's just way harder than even talking about, like somebody raises, Pradeep talked about master plan, right? The planning hasn't accounted for buffer zone. So all of these are pretty much linked, from our lifestyle to, the city planning to electoral agendas. It's all linked. And how do you kind of, unless I think we need to have this big picture in mind next time we react to anything in the public, right? So anyway, coming to the point, like, would anybody like to, let's it's 7 o'clock and we'd like to finish on time. If anybody would like to add any last words again on like what next, and would also request everybody in today's session, please add, you can put it on chat anyway, we're recording, add your thoughts on what are the options that you'd like to look for, and we'd like to go out and again publish a piece on here are the multiple possibilities that people are proposing, and then it kind of enriches the discourse also. So far I've heard this, like Jhatka has been talking about, keep limiting it to this existing 35 acres, not looking at anything on the other side, like Mr. Sanjay Mohan talked about. And there is also, Deepa was talking about this limited access, and of course there was this other extreme point about limiting all human activity, because, for example, I mean, this is like one of the few forests left really, and what right do we have, especially when there are other flora and fauna within that which deserve as much of a they deserve to have the forest to themselves. So yeah, so I think that kind of brings me to the conclusion. I'd like last words from everybody. Oh, sorry, and there's also this one very important point that Deepa made, right? How do you having more and more parks to plan for people coming in, and at what point do you really stop, right? This reminds me of one of the earliest citizen articles that we published about how wide should a road be, right? How wide is wide enough? Because you want more, there are going to be more people, there are going to be more vehicles, you keep widening the road. At what point do you really stop? And I think that is applicable for any of these situations also. So over to our panelists for last words. Leo, one last line. Would you like to come in?
I would say that there are 3 or 4 patches of land which have not been greened. One of them happens to be right next to my house. It is 6 acres and it is designated as a tree park. And it has not been a tree park for 20 years. So I've been petitioning the BDA for that. So I would recommend that the forest department abandon this idea of tree park in any forest area, and BBMP and BDA should develop those areas into dense tree vegetation of diverse forms, so that people can also have access. And I'm sure Joe would not mind it also, because he knows that he and I cannot cycle to Jakkur anymore or to Balandur anymore. We are that fit now. So we would rather have something close by in addition to Turahalli.
Definitely not. Definitely not. Let me speak because I've not been heard.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to come to next.
For the people, everything for the people. We finished with that. When you talk about education, we as responsible citizens, I think we need to first educate our ministers, our bureaucrats, our forest officers. We need to imbibe common sense into them. When they have common sense, they will not do anything that they're doing like this. I think this is where we need to go. Talking among ourselves is not going to help. It's definitely not going to help. This discussion of no value if we don't educate the guys who take decisions. We should raise our voice. We should question them at every point. They have no right to bulldozers. We have the rights. We are empowered by the Constitution. We need to stop them. We need to ask them questions. We need to tell them, sorry, we don't need this. You're being elected by us. You just do what you want, what we want you to do. You just don't stomp over us and do what you want to do, destroying our futures. I think this is where we need to step on, because we've been hearing about a lot of these things happening over and over again for the last 20 years.
Yeah,
there has to be a paradigm shift now. People have to question. We are getting, cornered in such a way that today we can't even raise questions. This is where we need to start. We see what has been happening in the recent past. We're just sitting quiet and doing nothing about it. We need to ask questions. They have no right. Let's educate our bureaucrats. Let's fill common sense into them. Let them understand that their for our benefit, not for their benefit. They're being paid for it. And our politicians, they should understand that they've been elected, even they have children, they are going to have grandchildren. The future has to be good, then the forest has to be there. Now, Bangalore has no more forest patch left. We cannot mess around. Let's leave it at that. That's all I finally want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Joseph. Alim, you wanted to come in. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mira, you talked about how long will we keep protesting, etc. No, so it all boils down to transparency. So if the forest department had said this is our plan, we have in mind, what do you all think? Please come and have a discussion, etc. It wouldn't have been this much aggressive and conflicting, etc. Even today, with your PCC of discussion, he is very mum about lot of things. What is the plan? He is not giving lot of details. Okay.
He actually said that this is just under the discussion stage and they're just, inviting responses from people. He said nothing has been finalized, no budgets, no DPRs have been given out. Of course, the bulldozer came in, that's a different matter.
They can just say, currently we are discussing these things. Okay, going forward, we don't know what will happen, etc. Like that, they can put forward some of the things. We have seen DCF and ACF carrying documents of tree park, which has landscaping, public, parks, etc., and then parking space, public toilets, etc. So it all boils down to transparency. That's what I wanted to say. And we should look at forming committees or to analyze all various point of views and understand it.
Thanks, Alim. So final word, Deepa, would you like to, just so we can wind it up? Would you like to add something? Deepa? Is she there? Yeah. Yeah, you're on mute, Deepa. Okay, I can't get her. Bharat, if you can just say the last few words and we can close then.
Well, you also did ask about the solution, and Alim did say about the transparency.
Yeah.
Ina, you muted me when I tried to talk.
Oh, sorry, I was trying to unmute you. Go ahead.
Okay, all I wanted to say was I agree with the fact that we need not only to take our children and adults into the forest and educate them, but we need to educate the people who are making the decisions right now. I think that's a very valid point.
Excellent. Thanks. Sorry, Bharat, go ahead.
Apart from those things, I think the structural solutioning that we need to do is to leave Turahalli or patches like Turahalli as a forest.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been speaking about planting Western Ghat species there. I don't think so that's sensible. If they really want to a forest or reforest patches, they need to do indigenous species. But the way Turahalli stands as of today, I think it's self-regenerating. Even that is not really necessary, because close to 120, 130 species of flora have been already documented from there. And I think there has to be greater stress on developing the 35 acres tree park that's by the side. So as long as it is not overflowing with people, I think we are still good to go with that facility available, apart from the BDS sculpture park and other parks that BDA and BBMP have been developing around Turahalli.
Right. So it may be an interesting thing for the community and your, the Save Turahalli group to look at what can be done with the existing parks and what needs to be kind of done to improve both in terms of amenities and access and to provide a more enriching experience for visitors. So that could be one. And please invite everybody again to just add your thoughts, and if you could, you're welcome to share your ideas and write-ups or even, short videos on what you think needs to be done going forward. Pradeep has given a case study. Thanks, Pradeep. We'll look at it and maybe incorporate it when we do the report on this. So thanks everybody for being here. As ever, we're available, offline and over email and on social media. So let's continue the conversation. And for this particular topic, we hope to kind of, one, document the multiple perspectives that are there, but also provide, possible solutions and to kind of add to the public discourse, as well as understand where people's preferences are and help people understand the implications of each of those solutions. So thanks everybody for being here on a weekday evening, and bye for now.
Thank you so much.